Hello, flute friends. I am Matthew Allison, host of the online group Solo of the Month, and today I am excited to be speaking with Teddie Hwang, who is a Baroque flute specialist. She's the chair of the Historical Flutes Committee for the NFA, and welcome, Teddie, to our talk today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be talking about that subject today.
So glad to be meeting with you. Now, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and what first drew you to the Baroque flute?
Yeah, so I started off as a modern flute major at Indiana University, got my bachelor's degree there. And some of you may know that obviously Indiana has a very big also historical music department, and that's how I got to know the Baroque flute. And just first I just picked it up kind of casually as an elective, and yeah, just fell in love with the sound and with the tone qualities and also the music, of course, to be able to really dig deep into Baroque music. And yeah, one thing kind of led to the next, and before I knew it, I decided to go full on with historical flute playing, and then went on further to study in the Royal Conservatory in The Hague in Holland, where I got my master's in historical flute performance.
Masters in Historical Flute Performance. So you really are a specialist in this instrument, and you've been playing it for a while now. That's wonderful. When you first started transitioning to playing the Baroque flute, what were some of the things that you noticed about being similar or different from the modern flute that we play?
Well, definitely the use of air, so air pressure, air speed, the amount of air. The Baroque flute takes much slower air, much less air, and everything works on a much more microscopic scale, so to speak. But at the same time, you still need strength because things are so refined that kind of developing that body awareness in whether it's in the embouchure or in your body and the breathing. You also actually need strength and as well as so awareness as well as strength. And yeah, and kind of creating also your own resonance, very much like how a singer does.
Oh, wonderful. And so, can you give us a little bit of a historical background or a little bit of a performance practice background or some ideas of I guess, a Baroque Flute 101?
In regard to the Corrente now, or was it just...
Good point. So in case anybody is watching this who isn't actively part of Solo of the Month, we are currently working on the Bach Partita in A minor, and the second movement of it, the Corrente. And so yes, thank you for bringing that up and mentioning that that is the movement that we're focusing on now. So yes, do you have what are some thoughts that you have for our members and the community at large of this movement?
Yeah, so I think it's a great piece that you chosen actually for this solo, and really happy to talk to people about Bach, about historical performance using the Corrente as an example, because it's really, really a fun piece, and I hope that I can help people get over some of the initial difficulties and invite people to really dig in. That's really the best of it. So really dig in and enjoy yourself without any expectations, and see what you discover. So before I dig in to whether it's historical articulation or ornamentation and so forth, I do want to start off with a very important concept that's important to me, as well as when I teach. I think it's important to tell people. Keep in mind that whatever you're going to hear me say today, or whatever you might hear from others about historical performance, do it for you, okay? Do it for your musical reasons. Do it for your interpretation. And try things out yourself and see how you feel, and see if you feel convinced. There's no point in adhering to some rule just because people talk about it, and also there's no merit in being historical. I'm a historical flutist, but my point is not about being historical actually, but rather I take joy in historical interpretation. I take joy in interpreting historical techniques and make them sound expressive in a way that's in line with my approach to music making. And while I do believe an interpretation based on historical playing techniques can give us a lot of insight into this earlier music, really take everything as guidelines. Okay, they are just observations, and keep in mind also, actually, a lot of things weren't written down in any of these treatises and writings that people might know from Quantz and so forth. So we're really only able to kind of deduce and interpret what we do have, and what we can gather, and that's really the fascinating aspect of it. So that's what I hope I will get people people will get out of whatever I'm gonna say today. Okay, so I think that's a really important point I want to get out there first and foremost.
And you mentioned Quantz and historical treatises, and I know that you're about to show a presentation that you have prepared, but do you talk about in that presentation resources where people can find some of these descriptions of performance practice, or do you have any thoughts that we might start exploring for those who are academically minded who want to read a book or a treatise or do a little bit of research around it? Are there references for those of us who don't have a master's in historical playing that are quick for us to find?
Sure. Actually, it's known as a method for the Baroque flute. It's called Method for the One-Keyed Flute by Janice Boland. But she actually, beyond the method, she actually gives a lot of background information, whether it's the history, aesthetics, different treatises of talking about Baroque flute playing, as well as music, of course, and certain approach and techniques on the Baroque flute. So, and it's easy to read, and I think it really gives a good summary, an overview of anything that's related to Baroque flute playing. So I'd highly actually recommend that to get started.
That's fantastic, because the first book recommended to me when I was an undergrad was Quantz on Playing the Flute, which was a little bit hard for me to digest as a 19 or 20-year-old. So it's more accessible than that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, the thing with Quantz, I think people should also realize that it's really not a book you just kind of read through. It's more like it's a resource. So if you have a question or you're concentrated on specific topics, or you want to look something up, then that's of course a good thing to have, and to just as a looking things up, but to really kind of get an overview of, again, styles and technique. I think really the Janice's book is much more suitable.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because the Quantz was a bit intimidating and overwhelming.
Oh, yes.
For a first look at it. So I'm glad that there are more modern resources that make it accessible to flute players today.
No, and you can always branch out. There's always room to explore further. So start small, start what's accessible, and there are plenty that you can dive into later. Mm-hmm.
And of course, your website is fantastic. I'll share a link to that below this video when the video gets posted. You've got some amazing resources of your own, and you teach flute too. So you are an amazing resource, and I would love to turn the talk over to you.
That's very nice of you.
Yes, I'm very impressed with everything that I've seen of yours on YouTube so far, and your website it's very easy to follow, and it's joyful. It seems like you really love playing this music. So
I do. Thank you very much.
So I'd love to turn it over to you, and you can just tell me a little bit more about what I don't know that I need to know about Baroque flute.
Sure. Okay. So just in case, maybe just to let people know, I'm also a photographer, so I'm very much into imagery, and I love to use imagery to explain music. So you're going to see some of that today. So
these photos are yours?
Yeah, some of them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Everything works out here?
Looks like it from my end.
Okay, great. And I just want to say also, in addition to music resources, I'd also suggest people to look at Baroque, or actually whatever period you're interested in. Look at the art and architecture of the time. Get a feel for its aesthetics, and that can also help you get closer to the essence of the music in a way that just reading about music won't really suffice. And maybe by getting closer to the music, you'll also be able to gain more joy out of playing it as well.
We can be inspired by the same things that the composers and performers of the time were inspired by if we look at the art and architecture of that period.
Definitely, yeah. That's actually too bad I don't have a kind of example of that. But anyway, so since this Corrente Solo of the Month started, I've been kind of listening to what people are saying, what are the difficulties, how people feel about this piece. And I hear definitely a lot of people have questions about articulation, okay? And because Baroque music is so based on speech, it's all about how we deliver a text in a compelling way. And this is why articulation is such an important tool for us as flutists for this music. And, this idea of comparing Baroque music to speech might be familiar to some people. And let me share, though, kind of my personal take also on articulation. And that is really to imagine kind of carving and sculpting your sound with the tongue. So here, you see typically how Baroque music looks like. Here's Bach A minor, the Allemand from the Partita. This is the Telemann Solo Fantasy. Here's an example of a Corelli sonata. I think people can all relate to this like endless string of 16th notes, right? In Baroque music. This is how Baroque music looks like. And now notice how like this endlessness and this repetitive pattern, to me, it reminds me of like a fancy piece of wallpaper. But a piece of paper or wallpaper is just flat, right? And I actually think Baroque music would sound much more fun like this, where we create literally a three-dimensional sound with lots of shapes, details, and contrasts. And, similar to how you think of articulation, like how this person is carving the rosette from a harpsichord of a lute. Okay, this is a Baroque stucco ornament from the palace of Frederick the Great, where Quantz worked at. So this is where then all those 16th notes will come to life, when we can create those shapes and contrasts. That we no longer see them as like a huge mess of notes and black ink everywhere, but to really experience them as something three-dimensional, whether there are landscapes or maybe not, maybe a kind of energy or some kind of character in a play, light and shadow, and maybe also dance, all right? So this is where I think articulation can help us achieve that. And I'll get into actual tonguing first, and then I'll talk about how that relates to slurring. So you see here, some of you who are in the group will know that I posted this image a week ago or so. These are some common passages, common patterns from Bach's Corrente. And in terms of articulation, the whole point is having variety, okay? That we don't want to continuously use the same tongue stroke. And I'll get into why that's that's a fun thing and a good thing to do. And the main syllables that we use are t and d. So t is, it sounds a bit stronger, maybe also clearer, and also it's most frontal. So you really have the tongue just right behind the teeth. And the d is then gentler, maybe slightly further back in the mouth. Yeah. And then there is also the r, which is where the R is, which is just a gentle, quick flick of the tongue on the top of in your mouth, yeah, and also placing the tongue slightly further back than d. So t, d, r. All three of them, your tongue is moving kind of progressively backwards. If that r is a bit difficult for U.S. English speakers, you can think of my name, Teddie. So you would say Teddie and not Teddie. So notice the Teddie. That's just very, very light touch of the tongue, all right? And that's basically the effect. So just think of me when you think of Baroque articulation. And all these tongue strokes then combine in different ways depending on the passage and context. So stepwise notes, like these ones here, they're gonna typically just alternate between t and da, ta da ta da ta da. For little groups like these ones where you've got 3 plus 1, so stepwise plus a little skip, or you can have the skip in the beginning and then stepwise notes. You'll want to shape them.
So that's like the long sequence in measures 7, 8, and 9 that we see in the Corrente?
Yes. 7, 8, and yeah, many other places. 27, for example. They come up everywhere. So we can use these articulation tongue strokes to shape them by saying ta da da ta. That's for the 3 plus 1, ta da da ta, or ta ta da da. So then you have the skip in the beginning, and the rest is smooth. And by doing ta da da, so by moving your tongue each time a little bit further backwards, you create the effect that the notes get lighter one by one, and it creates this kind of lifting effect in the sound. So this is the 3 plus 1. Or the 1 plus 3. Let's see, what can I find in the music?
Maybe around 38.
38.
Beats 2 and 3, and then 39.
I don't. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong bar. 38. Yes.
The second and third beats. Mm-hmm.
Yes. It's nice to actually give that slight kick to the sound where the high notes or the note that's skipping upwards, that gets a little bit highlighted with a bit more accentuation. Maybe sometimes, maybe not always, but that's certainly a possibility.
So the 3 plus 1 group, then we'd have 2 T's in a row, so ta-ra-ra, ta-ta-ra-ra, ta-ta-ra-ra, ta-ta. So the beats will always...
it will be ta-da-ra-ta. Ta-da-da-ta. So you move the tongue gradually back. Ta-da-da-ta, ta da da ta ta da da ta. Now, maybe just before we go on, people might be wondering what these little apostrophes are. So the apostrophe indicates stopping the sound with the tongue. And this is actually also a historically documented technique that people used back then. Just be careful, this is not the same as stopping your air or constricting your throat and stopping the air. You're basically thinking of your air as something like a continuous flow, and your tongue is kind of like turning, on and off a faucet. So there's always water kind of ready to come out, and your tongue is just, when you do that, the tongue is like feeling kind of the pressure of the air that wants to come out. So just briefly stopping the sound, and before you kind of open again to let the air flow. And this is really a highly effective technique for bringing even more clarity to the sound and also more defined shaping. So notice here, for example, this is, so in the very beginning, when you have big leaps like that, there's another place that's very effective. This is 17, 18, 19. So this is 18. That E on the downbeat of 19, it's not actually resolving to E minor. There's it's a diminished chord, so it's a dissonance right there. So don't play that too comfortably, so to say. And that kind of slight resistance right before the note, it gives that nice edge to it, and creating an intention that way. The technique of the articulation silence really helps to shape and define sound. So also in these groups, I'm saying literally tu do do tu do do tu do do tu, and the tongue kind of, it goes back, or it's ready for. So the tongue moves upwards back to the mouth, and it's back to the top of the mouth, and it's ready to articulate for the next note.
Is that almost like root? Like you're coming almost back to a T ending without...
Yeah, exactly. Tu, do, do, tu. So the tongue jumps back to the roof of the mouth again.
Okay.
Or if you have two T's in a row, then you just stop right at the same position. Tut, ta da da. The tongue springs right back up. Tut ta da da. Tut ta da da. And it's just, besides the acoustical effect, it helps bring the tongue immediately back to a position that's ready to play again. So that's also one of the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I'll have to say, though, this can be a little bit controversial, and it's a little bit more also advanced. So if you're not quite kind of feeling secure with using your airstream, and the important thing is make sure you're not stopping the sound with your throat, like I mentioned, like that's not what we want. So if that feels confusing for now, then I would suggest people just leave it. By doing these kind of alternating tongue strokes, that people will see a big difference, or hear a big difference already.
And it sounds like, for example, the 3+1 group, regardless of the articulation, the intention is kind of highlighting the 1 and then the leading to the next number. 1 E and 2 E and 3. Is that kind of the effect that happens when you do the ta-da-da-da?
Yeah, it's just it helps to group kind of stepwise. you're showing the shapes of the notes, more clearly. So notes that are moving in a stepwise motion, they tend to belong together. And then sometimes these leaps that kind of interject in between, those you'll want to show those as well. And this is also where the articulation silence helps to kind of really delineate that and to separate, to make those differences and show where are the steps and where are the leaps. And that's how we create shape then in the sound.
Was that type of distance between the leaps in order to help make intervals easier on that flute, or is it just a stylistic preference? Is it harder to do intervals on the Baroque flute than it is on the modern flute?
Harder to do intervals.
Like the descending interval where you have the stop, or the ascending interval where you stop the tongue between the leap one way or the other?
I think it's really, again, kind of using music as, or connecting music to speech, and having notes that have separate functions, that so just like how we articulate when we speak, right, and have clarity in our speech, doing these kind of varied articulation and having clarity in them also creates a difference. Again, creates, whether it's, if some notes are important or less important, you can highlight them in this way. So some notes will, pop out a bit more, whereas other notes that maybe get the lighter, end of the shape, right? So as I mentioned, these notes kind of lighten up as you play with the varied articulation. It's just like we have stresses in our language as well, right? Those stresses, there's the stresses, and then there are the syllables that are less stressed. It's the same thing.
Sure. So it is an artistic preference and not just to make it easier to do a leap. Because in all three of these examples, the stopped tongue is before a leap of one direction or the other. So I was just curious if it was harder to do leaps or if it's just purely artistic expression.
No, I think it's purely an aesthetic decision, and to be clear in the phrasing, that you have, these shapes that are either building on top of each other, or that maybe they are separate, or something is a surprise, just to have clarity in the structure.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. So, as I was mentioned, so between leaps, it's often useful to use two T's in a row, like this one here, to create that a clean break. But as I've mentioned to some people, so this is from a previous workshop, this music is very much influenced by string writing. Okay, so if you find passages that sound more like arpeggiations, so things like this, for example, or this one here, outlining, we'll want to outline the chord, and using that ta-da or ta-da-da combination would bring out that sense of, notes belonging together in the same chord. I like to see this as like kind of our way to create more resonance, more acoustical resonance on the flute. So like how string players, they play on strings, and the strings resonate even though they've moved on to other notes, right? But we can only play one note at a time, and we can have the acoustics in the room. And I think with this effect, by playing some notes less separated, we can achieve that similar effect like open strings on the violin, and have that same kind of, create that same kind of resonance, and so not, the notes don't sound too choppy. So, this, for example, I would actually I would really do ta-da-da, and not Does the difference come across? Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Because that ta-da-da, that just gives that really kind of energetic gesture, that upward motion, or whatever direction it takes, or instead of having those, that would be just purely on all equal tas. And again, I think the ta-da-da really highlights the movement, the gesture much better.
Yes, and the longer ta also helps bring out the pedal tone, or whatever the notes that you're wanting to highlight, in such a subtle way that it doesn't feel too affected, like adding too much tenuto would. Just keeping it from being shortened, rather than romanticizing it and making it extra long.
Yeah, and the thing with, I'm glad you brought that up, because the thing with working with these kind of varied articulation is that you make things happen like basically instantaneously, so you don't actually need a lot of time to create certain emphasis or to draw back, so like, even though I'm telling backwards, but it's the sound is instantaneous, and it's also kind of, it's diminuendoing at the same time. It's getting lighter at the same time. So we actually, without really working with timing a lot, then you can already create a lot of nuance just by varying your articulation. And also, even for ta, you can place your tongue just a little bit further back, and you can still say ta, all right? So even within each of those tongue strokes, there are slightly also further variations. So in a way, it's like we can have really infinite variations and combinations with these tongue strokes. Just one thing about timing, though, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't take time in this. I think this is also kind of a big concern with people playing this. Like, where do you breathe, right? So, where do you find kind of relief, once in a while? And I would say, yeah, we'll take time. Don't be afraid to kind of untangle these 16th notes and find the phrasings, find the moments where the music really pauses for a moment and then go on. And it doesn't need to be a lot, but doing, just, as I mentioned, just a little bit can already be highly effective. And also that's maybe all we need then for that particular passage to continue. And I would say really that organic quality, some just so you're moving forward, and then it maybe halts for a certain moment, and then it continues again. That organic feeling, that's the dance quality. That's the dance part of these instrumental movements. Because these aren't really dances anymore to dance to, but they're stylized instrumental forms of these dances which echo some of those original qualities of that particular dance.
Wonderful. So nobody would have actually been dancing to this. It would have been salon music or
no.
Music.
It would be highly interesting to choreograph this, if either with in a modern dance setting, or maybe incorporating Baroque dance elements to it. But no, this is definitely not a dance. With I would say all of Bach's works, they're not really meant to be danced to. No.
But inspired by dances that he would have watched or danced himself.
Yeah, so Corrente was a fast dance. Comes from corrido, running. All right, so there's something kind of shuffle yeah, something shuffles along, definitely, but there's, he packed a lot of stuff into every bar, into every gesture, and it only makes sense to be able to show them and unpack them and admire the wonderful details that are embedded in them. And I think that's really also how we can have fun with this music, is by discovering the details and enjoying them along the way.
And since you mentioned running, I know that another concern or consideration that I've seen posted amongst the group is tempo for this. Do you have a strong opinion on how fast or slow this would be performed? Or
I would say, really that's more of a secondary concern. Find a good tempo that's, or let's say find a way of playing that's comfortable for you, that you can create that organic feeling. Of course, you need to have a continuous pulse. It shouldn't be too kind of stretched out and just not too much. But a kind of a continuous pulse where you think of it as like you're leading your listener along, and you can pause sometimes. You can then continue, maybe get a little bit slower, and then you kind of pick up the tempo again. All these, if you're able to do all those nuances at a tempo that works for you, I think musically that's going to be so much more important and much more interesting to listen to, as opposed to just kind of going for tempo. Because tempo is really just one way how we can express character or emotion. There's so many, like I mentioned with articulation, I actually think that's a much more efficient way, because it doesn't take, you don't need to manipulate time, really. It just happens directly from us, right? Because that's how we speak, that's how we create the sound. And I would say that would be the first and foremost, and then you can think about how tempo comes into play.
I think that when people watch this video, everyone is going to sigh in relief at the exact same time, that we don't have to force our technique to reach a certain tempo in order to express the lightness or swiftness of this dance interpretation. So thank you for that permission to relax.
Absolutely. And if people do feel inclined to try these varied tongue strokes, this will give you the lightness and the lift that people are looking for in Baroque music. And as I mentioned, as you tongue further back, it will give you that lightness to the sound. And the simple fact that you're alternating tongue strokes, so not the notes are not going to sound the same. They will have different weight and different colors to them, and that's creating lightness, already. And we all know that you can, articulation. If you're creating lightness through articulation, you don't need to play fast in order to sound, light going.
Yeah, that gives it, the articulation gives the lift that we're looking for. Wonderful.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is there's so much to talk about. I have to kind of rewind a little bit. Right. So actually, this leads us to the subject of slurring. So how does slurring come into play with all this? So perhaps you might have heard, as I demonstrated some of these passages, that the groupings of notes created with articulation is similar to how we could group notes with slurring. And by the way, slurring is not a dirty word in Baroque music. Okay, so you can slur Baroque music. And there are plenty of musical examples, original musical examples, where we have long or relatively long passages of slurring. So yeah, don't feel bad about doing it. It's, again, what is your intention? What kind of effect do you want to create? So see the articulated method with all these different tongue stroke possibilities that we talked about. And by the way, also feel free to discover your own, that nobody's saying that it's not possible to do other types of articulation, tongue strokes. Just try things out. See the articulated method as simply additional tools in your toolbox of articulations, which also includes slurring. So we can achieve similar effects of groupings and shaping of notes with slurring. The only consideration is that slurring will give us a bit less of the texture in the sound, which we can achieve through articulation. So, for example, in the beginning, or I can, if this. We can do, if you would slur it. So you miss a little bit, there's a little bit less of texture in the sound, of course, right? Because the notes are,
the second and third note are less diminuted compared to the first one when you slur it. So I'm hearing that it's more clear that you have a hierarchy of interesting notes when you're doing the tonguing, and it's slightly less obvious when you're slurring it, because each of those other notes has a little bit. The second note has more sound when you slur it than it does when you tongue it. So that is very subtle, but it is definitely obvious that you're doing something differently that time.
Yeah. So that's just something to consider. And if you do slur, when people do slur, keep in mind though, it's always better to diminuendo at ends of the slur. So really, each time I kind of lift the sound toward the end of the slur, and that will help to create also a little bit a better contrast or I say more obvious contrast than in the shape.
And you also doing that with the lifts, it was more clear of where what would be the two were in those, because they were still twos there, so that had that little bit more emphasis. That was pleasant to hear. So thank you for that demonstration too. Slurring is okay to do.
Yeah. So, and even you can, like, by practicing, even if you decide to do slurring at the end, by practicing with these different tongue strokes, they will help you kind of figure out. It really makes you feel where the stepwise moving notes are and where the leaps are, and through that process, that will also help you make choices with slurring. So you can also just see it as a practice and then decide on what you want to use.
As a teacher, I like this challenge too, because automatically challenging us to think about articulation in a way that we hadn't before makes us slow down our practice steps too.
Definitely.
And be a little bit more involved in thinking about how we're grouping the notes. And so when our egos take over, sometimes we just play fast we see 16th notes and we play fast for the sake of playing fast. So changing throwing in the extra articulation gives us the excuse to slow down a little bit more than our ego might otherwise do, and that's really a great thing for me to see from a teaching aspect of, like, I'm going to have all my students try these articulations, if nothing else, to have them look at this with a little bit of a slower mindset and to feel those groups in that way.
Yeah, I really glad that you mentioned that. Yeah, it slows you down and it helps you to really kind of dig into the passage and dig into the moment and see what's exactly going on. And there's some really hard well, maybe on the modern flutes a little bit easy now, but even the really hard intervals, like all these jumping sevenths, things like this, for example, right? And then kind of these, I don't know, across the group figures, ta da da ta da ta dum bottom bottom, like it's with every group is changing. Like there's a lot to unpack, and I think it would be a big pity to just kind of race over this passage, because it's so exciting to have these like all these leaps happening everywhere and this kind of jagged shapes, and that's the excitement of it, right? At least I think so. And so we want to bring that out for the listener and really enjoy those jagged moments, and then it smooths itself back again, and it's really great fun to see the music this way, I think.
I think so too. I'm getting really excited to practice again.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Right, and so and also slowing down and like bringing that speaking quality to the music, as opposed to thinking, oh my God, when is this going to end, right? Or like, where am I going, right? There's no fun in that. And coming back to imagery, it's just really more fun to kind of take yourself on a ride, So are you seeing, jagged mountains, or are you kind of touching soft, flowing water? And, anything else in between. The possibilities are endless, and that's our universe in music and music making. I think, this articulation helps us to get ourselves into that space, into that zone of different landscapes and different shapes and forms.
And I love this example, because I like to think of articulation as being an expressive element, much like vibrato or dynamics and things like that. And you are absolutely highlighting how expressive the articulation is, especially by using these different shapes and different consonants. So thank you for showing the expressiveness that is articulation.
It's really fun stuff. It's really fun stuff. And to be able to do these have a varied and approach to articulation, I think that for me really opened up a whole nother world in terms of interpretation and thinking about expressivity in music. So.
I do have to ask, since I accidentally brought up the V word, vibrato, what are your thoughts on vibrato when it comes to this style and this performance practice?
I would say, in this music, there's not really much time in the Corrente. Maybe in the saraband, I think, this music really lives by its transparency and how shapes relate to each other. So if you can find a vibrato that enhances the phrasing, enhances the shapes of notes, then it is possible. There is just a lot going on, though, in Baroque music, and how there's a very intricate relationship between the notes and between the phrases. So I personally think that the music lives in this kind of lives from transparency, the lightness, kind of impulse and release. So always thinking about releasing. It's very easy for us to do impulse. So impulse is like something happens, there's tension somewhere, maybe the start of something, and then we need to back off. And I really think that Baroque music kind of lives is based on this relationship of tension and release. So you can have, maybe the tension is the vibrato aspect, but at a certain moment it has to release from that, because I think that's just the part of the language of the music, and how this musical language functions, is to have a balance in that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So it's hard to say, kind of make a generalization about it, but I would say, if then anything, keep it light and make sure always do enough of the releases. Like I said, tension is easy to create, but release is not so easy to create.
Wonderful. Any more tips or advice for especially we who don't have as much experience on this time period or on the one-key flute?
Maybe one last thing, trills and ornamentation. So obviously in this particular movement, there aren't really many places to do fancy ornamentation. There's no time. So, trills, little trills here and there are fine, especially at cadences. Some of them are already marked in the music. In this case, I'd always start with a note above. There's harmonic implications to that. It's dissonant in the context of the counterpoint, and also by starting on the note above, it helps us to give that energetic kind of start and kick to the sound. And the big question is always, of course, the length of the appoggiatura. So the length of when you first start the trill, right? And again, I want to tell people, don't get bogged down by any of these, fancy mathematical proportions. Think in terms of musical affect, think of expression, a character, and think along those lines, and let those intentions help you decide on the length. So generally, and this is just kind of like observations, right? How these note lengths can influence our experience of the music. So a longer, more kind of leaning appoggiatura will give a more tender or gentle expression. Sometimes it can also be a more emphatic in a kind of deep way. So not necessarily not really strong, but kind of deep, serious. So maybe that could be, so the trill in bar 10. That was a pretty long one that I did, and do feel free to take the time. It's binary, right? There's a repeat sign, so each time you play it, you can vary that. For one time a little bit longer, one time a little bit shorter, but kind of that lingering that's a more kind of tender expression, right? And a short appoggiatura, and often combined with then a quicker trill, that tends to sound more brilliant to the ear, more energetic. So the same passage. That just kind of maybe just a slight kind of ring or just a quick twiddle, something like, oh, a pop of sound there, right? And I think each of them definitely gives a very different impression and feeling to the passage. So again, it's what you want to say. What's the emotional impact you want to achieve? So literally play with them, play with different trills, make them play in a way to express an energy, express a character. Is it playful? Is it serious? Is it, like very sad? Or is it flirtatious? All of these are possible with trills. There are so many, again, infinite variations, and we can all achieve that through the different lengths of the appoggiatura, as well as the speed of the trill or the length of the trill.
So the trill becomes also an expressive element that we can be tender or we can be bright and energizing with it, and we get to choose based on what it is that we are wanting to convey from the music. So there isn't an expectation that a certain emotion needs to be performed with this piece. It's more along the lines of what you as the performer feels when you play it. Do you ever feel like you need to display a certain kind of emotion when you're playing music by Bach, or do you usually just decide on the emotion as you're doing it?
What do you mean by deciding?
Like, decide whether it's energetic or tender. Like, is that something where you are trying to please Bach or where you're trying to please yourself?
I guess I try to take cues from the music, and then there are times when you can take cues from the music, and there are times where, like that passage that I just played, where it's both possible. Mm-hmm. I think, at least. I think it's rather open-ended, and if you have the opportunity to repeat, then why not do it differently?
That's great. I know so many people are saying, what would Bach want? And we don't really know, right?
I think Bach wants us to play musically. I think Bach wants us to discover the different emotions that are possible and create art, create contrasts, and create emotions with his music, make his music meaningful in this way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, great. Any other tips for us, Teddie?
Well, I just want to say, we can really create endless nuances and discover them by taking things apart and discovering all the wonderful details that are embedded in this music. So, please, I encourage everyone to try to, I know it can seem kind of intimidating, but you can untangle all these 16th notes and discover the fun, discover the little universe embedded in this music, and take joy in this journey, take joy in the discovery, and really, try all sorts of things out, even beyond what I talked about today. Try all sorts of things out and enjoy the variety that's possible out there.
Wow. Well, thank you again, Teddie, for breathing a little new excitement into this old piece for me. And I look forward to looking more into your website and your YouTube station and Teddie Talks Traverso. Is that the tagline?
Yes, thank you. Yes, Teddie Talks Traverso is my platform for learning about historical flute playing, about historical flute techniques, but which, by the way, is not limited to the Baroque flute. any of the techniques that I talked about, like they all work. I didn't demonstrate on the modern flute now, but they all work on the modern flute. And yeah, I love to show flutists just what's the magic behind the print, and whether you're Baroque flutist or a modern flutist, everybody's welcome here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so very much for your time, and we look forward to seeing even more from you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for having me here.